Hey guys, it's Jane. It's Friday. It's beautiful winter's Friday. Here it's cold but clear and the sky is blue and yeah, it's lovely. I've had a great week at home by myself with Bubs, but very relaxing. I've read a whole bunch of fluffy nonsense, basically, and one other, a bit more substantial book. I didn't get around to Raven Stratagem. I just wasn't in the mood. I'm very confident that I'm going to enjoy it when I do read it. Everybody I know who enjoyed the first one loved the second one, so I've got no doubt about it. I just wasn't in the mood for thinking that hard this week. So I read a middle grade book called Escape from Mr. Limoncellos Library, which was a whole lot of fun. It's kind of got this Charlie and the Chocolate Factory vibe, only it's about books and board games. That's a lot of fun. It's also really short, sharp chapters, so very good for a bedtime story read. If anybody's looking for a book to read to a kid, bedtime story wise, I would recommend that you have a look at Escape from Mr. Limoncello's Library. I also read a fluffy contemporary YA romance, which I can't really explain it. I heard Jenn from Today in Jenn's Library talk about it, and I put it on hold in my library, and then it came due, and I was like, oh, well, perfect. I will read it this week on holidays. I normally am not a big fan of romance or YA, but what Jenn had said in her review is that this girl and this guy who are both old movie fans meet through this sort of online thing, and yeah, the story sort of goes from there. And I love old movies, and it just sort of, I don't know, there was something about the way she described it hooked me in. So, for a fluffy holiday read, this was fine. Lots of the plot points actually reminded me of an old movie, The Shop Around the Corner, particularly, which is actually a favourite. It's a Jimmy Stewart movie. It's a favourite of my husband's and I. And so that was kind of a nice sort of meta part of it. There are moments when there was a bit of yelling at the page because I knew how it was going to turn out from basically chapter 2. And by the 2/3 mark, everybody else in the story had worked it out except for our female protagonist. But it was clearly not that bright. But yeah, it is what it is. It was well done for what it was. So Alex approximately is, a fun holiday read. I finished the Elizabeth Bonesteel, The Cold Between, and I actually am right now in the middle of reading the second one of those, which is called The Remnants of Trust. So clearly I enjoyed the first one enough that I went back, and the library just happened to have the second one and it wasn't out or anything. I was like, oh, I'll read that. Between the two books, almost all of the surviving main characters from the first book are court-martialed. And so we open the second book with learning the results of the court-martials, and one of the characters was found more guilty than the others. Our two heroes from the first book are put basically on probation and sent to a different sector to continue on the ship that they'd been on. One of them's a captain of a ship, Galileo, and they're sent to a different sector. But one of the other people who was court-martialed was found significantly more guilty, and it turns out they were sent to the same sector, but everything was secret. Nobody knew that that's where this other prisoner was, and then all hell breaks loose. The other core ship, not the Galileo, but the other core ship in that sector is attacked by syndicate raiders, and 90-odd folk are killed on that ship, and the ship is so badly damaged it's going to be going to scrap. It only survived at all because the PSI ship in nearby got there in time to kind of save the last, to stop it kind of going boom. And what the attack was about was that these syndicate raiders had come to break out the guy that had been imprisoned. It's unclear initially whether he was in on it, or, was he being taken or was he escaping? So there's a whole bunch of drama going on. We're finding out more about the kind of shadowy corporate who was sort of it turns out was the real bad guy in the first story. We're finding a bit more about who we can trust in the upper echelons of the Admiralty and who we maybe can't. And there's also lots of stuff about things that happen to Elena, who's the chief engineer and who's one of the main characters in both books. What happened to her before she came to Galileo. It's just as enjoyable as the first one. It has a lot of the same flaws as the first one, but I'm really enjoying that. The only other book that I read this week, it's probably the best of these, is called Amberleigh. I know I'm not pronouncing that right, but I've looked at it and I honestly can't figure out how you would say it. Amberlough. It's a low fantasy. I found it on a list of, I think, a Barnes & Noble list of the best science fiction and fantasy books of 2017. So it's a brand new book. My library just happened to have it. And so, again, I just thought, oh, well, I'll get that one. The cover art had really caught my eye, and the little précis in the Barnes & Noble list had kind of caught my attention. It's a very low fantasy. There's no magical creatures. There's no anything really going on. It's just set in a secondary world. And it's really a story about the rise of fascism in this world of the story. It follows a bunch of characters who earn their living in a theatre. It puts on kind of burlesque shows. So there's the MC, who is the lover of a secret policeman, who is another one of the main characters. And there's the kind of main female actress who becomes a runner for the MC in his side hustle, and then also gets involved as, in all sorts of other political wheeling and dealing. There is this Nazi equivalent group who have been gaining power in an outlying region, and there's a slow influx of refugees into the city, people who for one reason or another aren't getting along with the Nazi equivalent. And then for the first half of the book, it's basically this kind of inexorable sort of events falling into place, and the Nazis are, moving and shaking, and they're on their way. And about the halfway point in the book, they reach ascendancy in the region that the main city is. And then there's a whole bunch of dealing with what do you do? How do you effectively resist when the Nazis come to town? The writing in it is beautiful and striking. The people, the characters really strike you as people. Almost everybody has done something wrong. Like there's no kind of angels in the story, but you still are kind of rooting for them, which is kind of, it's not like there's a happy ending, but I guess there's degrees of happy endings, isn't there? There's degrees of, sometimes in certain circumstances, it's not about winning, it's about maintaining your dignity or something, I suppose. It was a really moving story. So for anybody that is sort of feels like a bit of a tearjerker, or whatever, an emotionally affecting story about pretty grim subject matter, that is a recommendation. I'd love to hear what you guys are up to and what you've been reading. If anybody's read any of these books, I'd love to hear what you thought of them, especially Amberlough. If anybody else has read that one, I would love to hear what you thought. I hope you're all well, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.